Tensions rise in the Persian Gulf as the U.S. military deploys forces within operational range of Iran. At 8:15 a.m. in the Strait of Hormuz, the American cargo ship Liberty Pride suddenly shuddered as if striking an invisible obstacle. The hull below the waterline was torn, and water flooded the cargo hold. There were no signs of missiles, radar warnings, or radio signals, only a silent wake of destruction from underwater, raising concerns about an unobservable attack and the risk of sinking in a dangerous shipping lane. From Washington's perspective, the Strait of Hormuz is not just a maritime route, but a linchpin of the global economy, where more than one-fifth of the world's seaborne oil passes daily according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration and Reuters reports. Therefore, any minor incident in this area can immediately impact energy, markets, shipping insurance costs, and international diplomatic channels. For decades, the U.S. naval presence here has focused on maintaining trade flows and preventing minor shocks from escalating into major crises. In the 24 hours preceding the attack, officials in Tehran issued unusually stern warnings about increased U.S. military activity near Iranian waters. However, from the U.S. side, these statements were not seen as a sign of direct war, but were understood as part of a familiar deterrence strategy aimed at increasing tension without crossing the threshold into a full-scale military response. History shows that Iran often chooses controlled escalation rather than direct confrontation, especially in an environment where the U.S. Navy holds a clear advantage in conventional power. Instead of engaging head-on, Iran uses low-cost and hard-to-trace tools to create uncertainty, such as small boats, drones, naval mines, and mini-submarines, vessels that have appeared in many previous incidents recorded by news agencies like the Associated Press and the New York Times. These systems are not intended to win a large-scale naval battle, but to disrupt operations, forcing the adversary to be more cautious and increasing pressure during decision-making in crowded and politically sensitive waters. From Washington's perspective, the attack on the U.S. cargo ship was not intended to sink it or cause heavy casualties, but was a test of response, evaluating processing time, rules of engagement, and the level of political restraint all at once, thereby raising questions about the limits of what the U.S. is willing to act upon to protect freedom of navigation without sparking a broader conflict. The first warning did not come as an explosion or an emergency signal, but as a faint trace on the sonar screen, so weak it could have been dismissed as background noise. However, U.S. analysts retained the data, isolated the signal pattern, and cross-referenced it with existing databases. The results showed the signal matched the characteristics of a Ghadir-class submarine, a compact vessel designed by Iran for ambush operations in shallow and crowded waters where traditional naval advantages are limited. This vessel did not move continuously, but had remained hidden for nearly 48 hours on the seabed, with its main engines and most non-essential systems shut down, maintaining only the minimum power necessary for life support. In that state, it produced almost no noticeable sound, while above, a continuous stream of commercial ships created loud acoustic interference, and nearby, metal fragments and sunken wrecks reflected sonar signals in various directions, making the environment complex and effectively masking the submarine's presence. What Iran failed to anticipate was the U.S. Navy's changed approach to detecting underwater targets. Instead of relying solely on tracking sound, U.S. analysts monitor patterns of variation over time, observing what changes and what stays the same in an environment that is always in motion. In that context, absolute stillness becomes an anomaly. Hiding among metal fragments and wrecks did not make the target disappear, but only made the identification process more complex. U.S. forces are trained to operate in cluttered seabed environments, such as busy ports or areas with many historical wrecks. When the focus shifted from what is heard to what should not exist, the object's shape was gradually defined, with lines too clean and a structure too deliberate to be considered debris. After carrying out the attack on the cargo ship, the submarine did not head for open waters, but returned toward the Iranian coast, a calculated move to take advantage of the protection from coastal defense systems and the political risk of any pursuit. As it neared the Iranian coast, the submarine operated under the assumption that this area provided a safe zone thanks to surveillance systems, defenses, and the risk of escalation if attacked. During this phase, the crew believed the most dangerous part was over, as the sub had successfully attacked and retreated. However, as confidence grew and travel speed decreased to prepare for entry into what was considered a safe area, this was also the moment the U.S. side chose to act. Integrated tracking data from multiple platforms identified the submarine's location with greater precision, allowing U.S. commanders to approve a controlled strike from outside the danger zone. A U.S. aircraft moved into position out of reach of coastal defense systems, preparing to deploy an underwater weapon to neutralize the target rather than destroy it completely. The weapon used did not rely on raw destructive power, but had the ability to adjust its path in real time, tracking changes in pressure and movement in the water as it approached the target. Upon approach, the submarine's defensive capabilities were limited due to a design that prioritized stealth over durability. The explosion did not completely destroy the vessel, but damaged the propulsion system almost immediately, causing control surfaces to jam and internal electrical systems to be disrupted. The submarine remained intact but lost maneuverability. The Iranian side responded by increasing coastal radar monitoring and electronic jamming in the area. However, they did not deploy missiles or attack directly, avoiding crossing the threshold that could lead to a broader conflict. Underwater, the submarine was forced to surface in a disabled state, ending the threat without a large-scale engagement. Following the incident, the submarine was no longer a stealth asset, but became a strategic burden because damage to its propulsion and control systems rendered it unable to operate as designed. Iran faced two choices. One, tow the ship back to port for repairs, which would require a long time, high costs, and technical resources while being restricted by sanctions, as well as reducing underwater presence while the sub is sidelined. Repairs would also expose internal systems to various parties, increasing the risk of technical information leaks. The second option is to accept the risk of information exploitation if the ship falls into enemy hands, as modern submarines contain significant data regarding design, materials, and operational methods. Exposing these elements could affect the entire class of ships and reduce the effectiveness of similar tactics in the future. Both options entail losses in capability and security, meaning the initial advantage from the element of surprise was no longer maintained. In the aftermath, maritime activity in the Strait of Hormuz continued. Shipping routes were not disrupted, and U.S. forces did not change their deployment, maintaining the goal of protecting freedom of navigation without escalating the conflict. The Iranian side demonstrated the ability to cause disruption using low-cost means, but did not create a change in U.S. behavior. The U.S. response showed an approach based on control, data integration, and limited use of force beyond what was necessary. The event also reflects a trend in modern naval warfare where managing escalation, information control, and timing are as critical as sheer firepower. Simultaneously, the operational environment in shallow and cluttered waters necessitates the development of new detection technologies beyond traditional sonar, such as magnetic field sensors and continuously operating unmanned systems. The question remains whether this event is an isolated, controlled case or a sign of more complex underwater competition in the future, and viewers are invited to share their opinions and follow the channel's upcoming content.